Morning, everyone. Happy Mondays, and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's opinion editor, Emmeline Saunders, who's just had a promotion. So well done, Emmeline.
Thank you very much.
Now we're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day. Through it all, we want you to ask us your comments and questions. Get into the comments below and ask us whatever's burning a hole in the back of your head. We can't answer all of them. We will answer the best ones, and we'll do our best to put your minds at ease. So what have we got today? Well, the Mirror is splashing on Boris Johnson's latest morality donut in the middle of the national roadmap, in which he begs us to be cautious after lifting the restrictions that mean millions are getting infected and he's locked away on his own Freedom Day, if you can keep up with that. Now, as SAGE experts warn that cases will almost certainly double and could quadruple in the next few weeks to 200,000 a day, the Prime Minister is telling us to, and I quote, go forward with all the right prudence and respect for people, which of course he's displayed absolutely none of, while telling us we can forget about the masks, which show prudence and respect for others. Now, Emmeline, the question with this PM is not, gosh, has he done a U-turn? But what will the next U-turn actually be about, and when's it going to happen? So how long do you think it will be before the masks go back on?
Well, given that it took, 2 hours, 38 minutes for him and his ping, Rishi Sunak, for them to decide that actually they weren't going to take part in the VIP test and trace release scheme. Masks are going to be coming back on within weeks, aren't they? If not weeks, days, possibly. It's going to be, we're all looking forward to Freedom Day, but we're also looking forward to this pandemic being over, and that's not going to happen until we all take precautions. So let's give it, I'm going to put a crisp flavour on a month.
A month?
Yeah,
I'd put a crisp 20 on a fortnight, because that's about how long it took in Israel and the Netherlands. All right, they're run by slightly more sensible people.
Well, exactly.
Absolute clowns. So they turn around very quickly, and our infection rates are much higher than both of those countries. They're among the highest in the world at the moment. So I'd go for a fortnight, but keep watching the show, everybody, and maybe we'll find out whether it's Emmeline or me who are actually correct. I keep asking your questions. When do you think masks are going to go back on? Do you have some faith and confidence in the reopening? Because not a lot of people do. And it's worth pointing out that a survey in the Mirror this weekend revealed that 85% of people are not paying any attention to what the government says whatsoever, and they're going to continue to social distance. 70% say they are still going to wear masks in public transport and indoors and in shops. 61% think there's going to be another lockdown this year. And today on page 5, our colleague Dan Bloom reports that 60% of commuters are worried about using public transport if other passengers stop wearing masks. And a third of people are scared of going to a wedding. And let's not forget, there are about 3.8 million vulnerable people, 2.4 million or so of them who have cancer, who don't see this as a freedom, but it's another reason they have to stay shielding in their own homes. So it's not freedom for anybody very much, it would appear, because we're all feeling more anxiety, we're all more concerned, and Boris Johnson's actually locked away, and he was the only person who was going to be free anyway with this. But Emmeline, if public confidence in unlocking is this poor, are we going to see this economic bounce that Johnson needs to have, and which his backbenchers have spent the past year and a half telling us would happen if we just unlocked, because it's the locking down that was the damage to the economy, not the pandemic? Are we going to have that skyrocketing spending he was talking about?
I think we just have to look at last August, don't we, where we needed the Eat Out to Kill Ourselves scheme in order to go out and spend money, because people were so scared of getting this disease after how many months of locking themselves away. So no, we're not going to see an economic bounce. You can't go on holiday still without going through all these ridiculous tests to come back. You can't, if you go to a shop and get COVID, you're going to be isolating for another 10 days. Even your kids coming back from school, who knows if they caught it in the last few weeks of term. It's going to be, I don't think Boris is going to get what he wanted out of this. And this is a man who, as you say, Susie, is locked away at Chequers right now in his lovely mansion in the Buckinghamshire countryside. So he doesn't care, does he? He's not going to be online shopping.
No, well, yeah. As Mike says there, happy it's too hard, we give up day. The sign of a good government is not saying, do you know what? I don't know, you do it. That's not a good government at all. Stuart says infection rates mean nothing. I think you mean as long as the NHS is not overrun, deaths stay low. Let the vaccine do the job and get back to normal. Unfortunately, Stuart, the predictions are that the NHS is still going to be overrun if we go at our current rate, because there are 550 people at the moment on mechanical ventilation in the UK in NHS hospitals. Now, that's enough. We can cope with that. And it's about a tenth of where we were back over the winter. But with the infection rates doing this kind of a rise, right? They're not going up like this. Sorry, like that way. They're not going up like that. They're going straight up. We look like we're going to be infecting as many, if not more people than we were infecting over winter. And despite the fact that the vaccines help and they weaken the link, they don't break it entirely. There will still be hospitalizations. There will still be deaths. The rates have dropped. But just because the NHS managed with it over the winter doesn't mean they can still manage with it. There's a lot of NHS staff off. There's a lot of them isolating. Some of them have left the service. You cannot recruit new nurses and doctors like this to come in and fix the backlog. So there are other problems going on. Lisa says, schools are closed in my area because of COVID. My neighbours have COVID. It's everywhere. I've lost count of the number of people that I've had conversations like this with, Emmeline, who've suddenly come down with it. Most of them, mercifully, have got sort of severe symptoms of a cold. But I also know people with cancer, and I know people with suppressed immune systems who are going to be having a lot of fear and would have a real problem. The case of Andrew Marr last week, who had really, really bad dose of COVID despite having been double jabbed, and he's had a stroke, so he's in the vulnerable group. This isn't something which we can say it's not there is no damage likely to the NHS and we can just carry. I mean, I think that was the idea, wasn't it? When we could unlock, we could merrily let the fairly healthy people get infected over the summer and the NHS would be fine. And that doesn't appear to be what Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance and all the scientists are saying, does it?
No, I mean, we talk about 200,000 cases a day, which sounds terrifying, and it is. And what that actually translates as under Professor Ferguson's modelling is 2,000 hospitalisations a day. 2,000 people going to hospitals every single day over the summer.
Yeah, and it was 4,000 last winter, 4,000 or 5,000 going up to. So if you have 3,000 in the summer, what's it going to be in October when the infection has spread right across the country? At the moment, there's been about 5.5 million cases that have been tested. So perhaps 10% of the population, if you count those who weren't tested as well, have been infected. The other 90% are yet to catch it. Hopefully many of us are vaccinated and we wouldn't have a bad dose. But you get a dose, you're still off work for a week. And if you have children, that's 20% of the population, which we don't know some of the long-term effects, and then they can still get long COVID. Now, Lisa says, do you think we will have another lockdown? As I said earlier on, Lisa, 61% of the country thinks we do. I think we're going to have restrictions during winter time, probably for the next couple of years. And I would imagine that's going to have to include some lockdowns if it gets sticky. And if the cases continue as they are, it's going to be sticky. What do you think, Emmeline?
I think it's going to come down to whether Boris is brave or cowardly, isn't it? It's going to be...
So we know then, don't we?
Let's take a little bit on that, shall we? Has he got the political capital in order to call for another lockdown despite huge opposition from his backbenchers? Probably not at this point. I mean, he's wasted a lot of political capital, hasn't he, this year in lockdown, opening up again too early. It's happened the last 2 times that we've locked down. We've come out of it too soon. It's going to happen again, inevitably. And, will he be forced into locking down maybe in the autumn, winter time? Possibly. I suspect we'll have more, like, as Susie said, restrictions. Masks will come back quite soon. Social distancing will come back. Maybe you'll have to wash your hands 30 seconds instead of 20.
Yeah. That's kind of the weird thing about the Freedom Day business, is that we could all be going out. We could be having staycations. We could be having outside weddings. We could be seeing our friends. But if we just kept to a rule of 6 indoors and kept our masks on, which are the least damaging, harmful, problematic issues, I would have thought, then we could still be spending, we could still go out and have a summer, we would still be keeping infections down a notch, especially with the school holidays. I don't understand why they've had to lift everything when some of the easier bits of those restrictions could have helped us. Now, Matthew says, what would you say to those who think COVID-19 isn't real and or refuse to take the vaccine? I can't tell you, Matthew, because Facebook has got rules about how much swearing we are allowed on these things. And I'm not allowed to say some of the Anglo-Saxon terms I would throw at those idiots. But what I will say is that when you have someone who first hears, let's say, that COVID-19 is a hoax, or that the vaccines are terribly bad for you and you shouldn't have them, or they've got a microchip in. Once you start following that rabbit hole down the Facebook algorithms and Instagram and Twitter and the others, you see more and more tweets and posts about the same thing, and they reinforce that first thing you've heard. So even though you start off as a sane, normal person, you end up in a virtual world where everyone seems to think the same as you, and it is a big conspiracy, and it makes more sense to you. So I would say that there are lots of innocent people who have been persuaded to think that way because of the way the algorithms on places like this work. If you want to avoid those algorithms and keep an open mind, I would say what you need to do is like posts that you don't like now and again, right? And that confuses the algorithm, so you still keep seeing alternative views. I would keep doing that if that would be my advice. And people who are actually going out and intentionally spreading stuff, and we do get one or two on here when we're talking about vaccines and so on, I think they're damaging, dangerous individuals who should be locked up and have their computers taken away. What about you, Emmeline? What do you think?
Well, I like the very. We're not overreacting at all there to lock them up.
No, lock them up. Treat them.
I do feel sorry for people who refuse to believe reality that surrounds them, and I think that we have to have a certain amount of pity for these people, because fear is a very powerful and confusing emotion to experience day in, day out, and a lot of this denial comes from fear, comes from anxiety. But as Susie says, you have to immerse yourself in other ways of thinking as well. You can't allow yourself to be trapped in these rabbit holes of COVID denial and vaccine hesitancy. And I spoke to a young person last week, Hannah. I won't reveal her last name because she didn't want me to. She's 28 and her mum has had breast cancer. Her elderly nan has been very sick, and she refuses to take the vaccine. And I wanted to know why. And she said that she didn't believe in the greater good. And I thought that was a really interesting and really sad way of seeing your place in this society, where we are meant to care for each other. We're meant to care for the most vulnerable among us. And yet there was this kind of weird sort of being, as my mum would say, an awkward cuss about it. You just don't want to do something that would be beneficial to other people unless it really helps you out. And as much as I said to her, but having the vaccine will help you too, she didn't believe it. And there's no arguing with that, because once you've made up your mind, anything that comes to you that's different in the way that you explain it, you're just going to shut down and be like, no.
It sort of reinforces it, doesn't it? It doesn't. It doesn't convince anybody. We live in this time of culture wars, whereas someone says something you agree with, then everything they do is right and brilliant. And if they say something you disagree with, then you have to shut them down and ignore it in some way. Now, Diane says, are schools infected? Infections always seem to go up when kids are at school. Well, infections of everything. Anyone who's got children in their lives will know they're walking biological warfare experiments. And we are a victim of one at the moment, it would appear. Boris Johnson's theory seems to be that we need to get them infected. Now, at the bottom of page 5, there's an interesting story about this. There is an announcement later today from the Vaccines Minister, Nadine Zahawi, about jabs for teenagers, but just for vulnerable teenagers, not all children. And children are 20% of the population. It's under the black banner that no one can see. There you go, down the bottom. Ministers may block shots for teenagers. So they'll let the vulnerable teenagers have it, people who are also living with someone who is vulnerable in their family, but not all children over 12, which other countries are doing. Now, the reason for that is some caution. They want to know which jabs are more effective for children, which have more risks. AstraZeneca is known to be a little bit more risky for people who are under 40, for example. So they need to know how that works in children. There are some studies and trials underway at the moment, and they don't want to act before all of those come back. But some of them have come back today, and there will be an announcement later on, which we expect will be for vulnerable children to have it. But Here we have, 20% of the population, and we can't reach herd immunity without those children having immunity. And perhaps that's why the government's trying to get them all infected in a way. They're less likely to die, Emmeline. And so I suppose from Boris Johnson's point of view, the thinking is, well, let's let them get slowly infected during the summer holidays, and perhaps again in September when they all go back to school. And that will help build the herd immunity that we need, because they're such a great disease vector, aren't they?
Yes. Well, yes, it seems that anecdotally, every single parent I know has had their child off school in the last few weeks, or their bubble has burst. So infection is clearly rife in schools as well. Should children have the vaccine? If you're old enough to decide for yourself that you want it, absolutely go for it. And I think as well, if the science is saying that vulnerable children should have it, please, if you're a parent, please do talk to your child about having it too. Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's going to run rife over the summer. I think Boris has spoken about having a natural fire break with the 6-week summer holidays.
It's not much of a fire break, though, is it? Because
really
it's directing the fire at one part of the population, which is a bit sticky. Now, Paul says, why have the most vaccinated countries in Europe got the highest rates of COVID? Well, Paul, we are one of the highest vaccinated countries in Europe. We're doing better than lots of countries in Europe, but we still only have 52% of the population double jabbed. And you need to be double jabbed to be protected against the current sort of variants we're dealing with. And that means that 48% are free to get it. Plus, a section of that 52% will still be hospitalised. They will still die, and they will still get it and have to be isolated and off work for a while. So the fact that we are well vaccinated is perhaps why us and the Netherlands and other countries that have done well with their vaccinations have decided to reopen. Israel was the best in the world. They've got about 62% of their population double vaccinated, and they burnt the masks. They had to put them back on again a fortnight later. They opened up and they've had to lock down again. Australia was doing very well. Sydney's in lockdown at the moment. Netherlands reopened. They've had to shut down again. Paul says, this is not Freedom Day for a lot of people. I have MS, an autoimmune disease. Having my immune system go into overdrive causes more issues than just COVID. There are people like Paul who are, look at him, not old, not frail, not vulnerable, not by any means ready to shuffle off this mortal coil. And I'm sure his loved ones wouldn't want him to anyway, even if he was 85. And this is not okay by him and by an awful lot of other people. But I suppose, Emmeline, part of the gamble for the Prime Minister, we're a long way off a general election yet, but he's probably thinking how many of the people who are vulnerable and shielding, how many of the people who are children who might get infected, or younger parents, how many of them are going to vote for me? I think the answer is actually quite a lot, but I imagine his calculation might be a bit different. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Paul as well. I've got a relative with MS who is also incredibly concerned about this opening up, and he said she will not be going out to cafes, she will not be mingling inside with anyone. So, as Paul says, this is not a Freedom Day for a lot of people. Does Boris care about these people? I mean, there's 3 million vulnerable people in the UK. Does he care if he loses their vote? I don't know. I think the polling suggests that probably not. He can just do whatever he wants at this point in time.
Well, he did win, a big majority, and the surveys, the polling is showing that so far this isn't denting his popularity, which I find very difficult to believe. But I've been in that state of mind since about 2010. So, let's just see. But there is this U-turn this weekend, and it does seem a bit like things might be changing. Boris and Rishi actually had to be forced to follow the rules that they set for other people. There are 500,000 people self-isolating at the moment, and these two were going to opt out of it. And we thought about opting out of it. They definitely were opting out of it. Not just that, they were joining a trial and picking which side of the trial they were going to be on, which, by the way, is not a scientific trial. On the one hand, this is good because it's like Dominic Cummings, hit a roadblock halfway up the A1 had to turn around and come back, which is for the benefit of everybody. But on the other, it's still not a good look, is it, Emmeline, for a Prime Minister to think that the rules don't apply to him and have to be forced into it?
It's absolutely terrible. And yet, what could possibly sum up more than this perfect anecdote, how Boris has treated this country all along? It's just incredible. And like we said earlier, it took, look at that, 2 hours and 38 minutes for the screeching U-turn to happen, and for them to grovel to a country who has been baffled, confused, furious, left alone, ignored by this government. It's just incredible. And I think, again, as we said earlier, Boris is now isolating at Chequers, so a very lovely country pile in Buckinghamshire. I'm not sure where Rishi is.
He'll be in his lovely mansion in either in London or in Richmond in Yorkshire, I imagine, his constituency.
Perfect.
But either way, Rishi is married to the daughter of a billionaire, so he's a very rich man. He can isolate in some luxury with swimming pools if he wants to. Boris Johnson at Chequers, to be fair, does have to pay for all his food and drink and watering. And I imagine he'll be trying to get his thousands of pounds of organic food deliveries transferred down there in an Uber, I should think. Well, he does have to pay for himself to eat anyway in Downing Street, so it makes no difference to him. But Chequers was actually given to the nation in order that prime ministers had somewhere to rest and recuperate. That was the point of it originally. So I'm kind of okay with him being at Chequers. And I think, considering what Dominic Cummings was saying about people trying to keep him out of the Cobra meetings, it's probably to everyone's benefit if he's not in Downing Street. Yeah. Now, Mike says, did anyone catch the moment Robert Jenrick's soul left his body on Andrew Marr yesterday? This is that housing minister, I think he is, who was sent out to do the rounds of the Sunday political shows and justify the fact that Boris Johnson definitely was going to take part in this trial and wasn't going to isolate, and he was taking part in a pilot to help the rest of the country not have to isolate at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then by 10:38, whoops-a-daisy, no, he's not. I didn't catch that moment because I was busy eating croissants with my daughter, I'm afraid. Emmeline, did you see it?
I did not, I'm afraid. I was doing similar.
No, we missed it. Tell you what, Mike, if you can grab it and get it on a video, we'll tweet it out later on, because I'm sure it's something everybody should be sharing. Now, one last question on this. The scientists have said that the tracing and isolating and pinging and quarantining doesn't work unless you have some kind of incentive or make it easy for people to stay at home. Now, the statutory payment, if you qualify, you have to apply for this, is £500 for 10 days, 50 quid a day. I know of at least 3 people, says Ian there, that have decided to stop self-isolating yesterday because of Johnson's and Sunak's pilot scheme. Self-isolating, if you're pinged by the app, is only advisory, so you're able to do that. But if you're told by Test and Trace officially, it's £1,000 fine up to 10,000. So I hope they are only using the app. But you also get, so it's £500 for 10 days to pay to stay at home, £98 if you have to rely on statutory sick pay for a week. That works out to just over £13 a day to run your household, buy your food, pay the bills. It's below minimum wage, and so most people who are asked to isolate that way don't do it, especially those in poor areas who are perhaps more likely to get infected. And perhaps only 20% of cases, it was said over the weekend, are actually getting a test if they have symptoms, because people don't want to be pinged and don't want to be told they have to isolate because they can't afford it. Cases could actually be then 5 times higher than we know about, according to some SAGE experts. So, Emmeline, it's all very well for us to criticise, but what do you think we need to do, or we could do, to bring the cases down? The public appear to want to bring the cases down, and they want to do what's necessary. The Prime Minister doesn't. But what could we do?
So bring cases down, I mean, I think continue to take the precautions that you feel comfortable with, whether that is social distancing, whether that's avoiding indoor mingling with other people, whether that is wearing a mask outside. I mean, these are the things that we know work for sure. And well, there has to be a proper healthcare system in place as well, and there has to be a proper financial support for people who must isolate. I think Private Eye said this week that even the staff at the Test and Trace scheme themselves only get the statutory sick pay. So if they have to isolate, they get 96 pounds a week.
£98
a week,
just over.
And that's the people who work for the government's Test and Trace system. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
It's about £13.60 or so a day on statutory sick pay, which is more than Boris Johnson spends on his lunch. No, less than Boris Johnson spends on his lunch. Right, his lunches from Dalesford Organic are about 14 quid. well, the trouble is, I think this man has never had to. I mean, the same problem with Cameron to some extent. If the person who's running the country has never had to budget, they've never had to queue, they've never had to wait for NHS on a waiting list, they've never had to rely on the NHS to save their lives or that of their families. Well, apart from recently, of course, Boris Johnson has, but they've never had to. He just strikes me as the kind of person who's never put the kettle on and said, "Does anyone else want a cup?" He's only ever put the kettle on for himself, if he's ever done it. He's never gone to the shop and bought someone else's sandwich while he was doing the sandwich run. He's always sent someone else out. In fact, there are anecdotes saying he sent interns out when he was editor of The Spectator. He sent interns out to buy him a lunchtime sandwich and never gave them enough money to actually purchase it. So they had to spend their own cash. I mean, he's just not a normal human being. I think, why can't we say, I don't care about the politics almost now. I just want a normal human being who has once had to struggle to be Prime Minister, because then they might understand how an awful lot of other people live. But anyway, I know that there are some questions going on, some of them sensible and some less so, in the comments. Keep asking them. What do you think about masks coming off? Are you going to take yours off? Have you had a big bonfire? How are you going to feel about being asked to pay for some more masks in a couple of weeks? Are you going to do it if the rules change? Are you worried about shielding or anyone that you care about? What do you think about the Boris Johnson U-turn this weekend? And what do you think the next U-turn will be? Because that's the question. We should have a bet on that, some kind of sweepstake. But first, there is some good news, which has been brought to you solely by COVID-19. And here it is. Now, she has been calling for years for disease-ridden migrants who spread terror to be blocked at the ports. And you'll be glad to know that our dear friend Haiti Plopkins has finally got her way. She is going to be deported from Australia for breaking quarantine rules during a 10-day hotel stay ahead of appearing on the Aussie Big Brother. She was shooting videos of herself telling people how she was breaking quarantine rules in this hotel and opening the door without a mask on and generally being a disruptive twat. But Emmeline, does this give you the same warm feeling in your tummy that it does me? Can we give some kind of medal to Australia for this? What do you think?
I do have a warm feeling in my tummy, except that I know she's coming back to our shores. So it'll be really nice if we could just shut the borders right now. Hopefully in the next 13 hours before she makes it. This is just, it couldn't happen to a nicer racist, could it? She is a grifter. A grifter's going to grift. She was over in Australia to take part in Big Brother VIP. And that really is scraping the barrel. Poor Australia. Take the dregs of our society if you want, but don't put them on TV. Don't call them.
They didn't want the dregs of our society in the first place. We did, to be fair, we did send them there, including some of my own ancestors and relatives who were just hungry people looking for a sheep to eat, I should point out. Continuing miscarriage of justice. One day I'll win them a pardon. But I think perhaps, Australia is having an elaborate joke at our expense, frankly, sending a nasty person who hasn't been convicted of anything yet back home is a bit irritating. But Eva says, I hope she has to quarantine for 10 days here in this heat. Might even be hotter than Australia at the moment because it's Australia's winter. So, yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I don't know where she lives anymore because she had to sell her house after that big libel case. So presumably she's got a home somewhere, some sort of dustbin or something she can live in for a bit, like Oscar the Grouch. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Now, have we got any more questions before we wind up? And finish for the day? Our backstage techie is going to throw some up. Here we go. Judith says, Wales is still wearing masks, etc. What's so bad if it saves lives? This is the thing, isn't it? I think they are a bit of a pain, especially when it's hot. And I was wearing one the other day and I couldn't make myself heard very clearly to people and I couldn't hear the other person. So we had to sort of hold our masks out and try and speak and put the mask back on. And it was a bit daft, but it's not that much of an imposition. Really, is it? And if it does help other people, and if you're sneezing or whatever you sneeze in, oh God, get another mask. But it's not. I don't think it was damaging the economy. I don't think it was hurting anybody. Really, I saw Julia Hartley-Brewer posting on Twitter yesterday that you can get out of wearing a mask if you can say that it causes you immense distress. Haiti Plopkins causes me immense distress. She's still allowed in the country. I don't know how that works. Yeah, Kazzy says, you're slating the government on this post, but quick to encourage people to roll up their sleeves for their vaccine. Have you heard yourselves?
The two are not mutually exclusive, Kaz.
Yeah, you can say both things. It's not the government's vaccine. It's Oxford University vaccine, was the first one in the world. It was developed by a couple of women, and whose names I can't immediately remember. And it was the task force was run not by the health ministry, but by the business department for the first year or so. And there was a woman in charge of that who was very, very good at her job. And so we owe our vaccines and the vaccine rollout and whatever benefits we do have from that to 3 women, not the government, not Boris Johnson. Literally, he had nothing to do with it, although he's keen on taking credit for it. Mm-hmm. Rob says, we all need to be careful to help the vulnerable feel safe so they can open up as well. Yeah, that's the one thing, isn't it? That's what masks were about, and it's what vaccines are about, Emmeline. It was doing something for somebody. It was believing in the greater good, unlike the person you spoke to yesterday, Hannah, who had lost faith in acting for the sake of everybody else. There are still a majority of people who think the greater good does matter. Unfortunately, we haven't got one in Downing Street just at the moment. Do you think that the great British public care for each other is going to win the day or not?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the Mirror's polling today, it clearly shows that people still care about each other. You still want to wear a mask. That's not for your benefit. That's for your neighbour's benefit. That's for the person you're sitting next to on the bus or you're going into Tesco with. So let's face it, the pandemic has been truly, truly awful, really horrific. So many people injured, dead because of it. But it has shown a really lovely spirit of community. It's brought us all back together. Despite what the government wants, we are stronger for it. Let's just hope that it continues. Yeah,
and it does show that, generally speaking, we ignore idiots, which is why Haiti Plopkins had to go to the other side of the world to get work. Now, thank you for joining me, Emmeline. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and watching. And we will see you all again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda, when probably infection rates will have jumped even higher. But I'll keep my mask on. You keep your mask on. And let's see where we get. Bye, everybody. See you Wednesday.